Let's talk about asbestos bans and how it is still used today. Eventually, governments got on board with the health risks associated with asbestos and began to enact bans. Denmark was the first with their 1972 ban on the use of asbestos in thermal system insulation or pipe insulation. The US banned asbestos-containing spray applied fireproofing in 1973 and asbestos-containing pipe insulation in 1975. Sweden jumped onto the bandwagon in 1976 with their ban on asbestos pipe insulation. In 1977, the US banned artificial fireplace embers that contain asbestos. 1978 brought an end to manufacturing of spray-applied uses for asbestos in the US, like popcorn paint. But not the use. The asbestos industry was able to convince the US government to allow manufacturers to use up their remaining stock, so asbestos in popcorn paint was installed into the 1980s. In 1980, Denmark banned all uses for asbestos, except cement roofing. Over the next 2 decades, several countries enacted asbestos bans of some form. This list continues to grow as other countries enact asbestos bans. In 1989, the US EPA issued a final rule under Section 6 of the Toxic Substances Control Act, or TSCA, banning most asbestos-containing products. The asbestos industry fought back, though, and this ban was overturned in 1991 by the Fifth Court of Appeals. The courts determined that the EPA failed to provide sufficient evidence to justify the ban. In 2010, Canada was still mining 150,000 tons of chrysotile asbestos and exporting nearly 90% of it. Here is a clip from a 2010 CBC News production called Canada's Ugly Secret. The clip shows workers handling asbestos with no real protection. At the time this video was filmed, India had banned the mining of asbestos, but not the importation or use. Here is a clip from a May 12, 2011 episode of The Daily Show, titled Awed to Death.
Quebec is standing by its name. Town Director, George Gagné.
Asbestos has been banned in some part of the world, but for here in Quebec, we're telling that you should use more asbestos.
Really?
Yes.
Mining for asbestos in Canada finally ended in 2012. In 2016, the U.S. Congress passed the Lautenberg Chemical Safety Act that was eventually signed into law by then-President Obama. This law enabled the EPA to prioritize health concerns over cost-benefit analysis when evaluating asbestos, meaning the EPA could finally regulate asbestos based on health risks. At this time in 2016, U.S. manufacturers were importing 340 tons of asbestos annually, mostly for the use in the chlor-alkali industry to manufacture chlorine. In 2018, Canada finally banned asbestos use. In 2019, the EPA introduced a regulation called the Significant New Use Rule, or SNUR, for asbestos. This rule essentially requires industry to obtain EPA approval before resuming use of asbestos containing products that had been discontinued or that were not in production at the time of the rule's implementation. As part of this SNUR, the EPA stated that they had found no information indicating the traditional uses were ongoing and therefore now banned. In November of 2019, the Ninth Circuit Court ruled that the EPA could not ignore the legacy uses. As an acknowledgement to that decision, the EPA said it plans to consider legacy uses in a Part 2 of the risk evaluation. Other groups have concerns regarding the legacy uses as well. As a result, lawsuits have been filed. In December of 2020, a federal judge ordered the US EPA to start tracking how much asbestos was being used in the US. The courts determined current regulations contained a loophole that does not prevent companies from importing products containing unintended levels of asbestos. For example, in 2015, asbestos was found in crayons and kids' detective kits that were manufactured in China. In 2024, the EPA issued a rule banning the use of chrysotile in the chlor-alkali industry, gasketing materials, brakes and other automotive friction parts. This new rule is the first to target a specific form of asbestos and did not address the uses of other forms of asbestos like amosite, tremolite, chrysotile, actinolite, or anthophyllite. Nor did the 2024 rule address any of the so-called legacy uses that were discussed in the previous court cases. According to the USGS, in 2023, the worldwide top asbestos producer was Russia at 630,000 tons per year. Coming in at number 2 was Kazakhstan at 260,000 tons. Other producers include Brazil and China. China is the largest exporter of asbestos-containing materials. In 2023, China exported over 300,000 tons of asbestos-containing products.
Remember, everything we do together.
The short answer is yes. Although the risk of buying a product today that contains asbestos is low, it is still possible. The bigger concern would be exposure to the asbestos-containing materials already in place. Be sure to watch our video on asbestos-related health concerns.
I know what you're thinking. These are big steps, and we're gonna be okay. Tomorrow is the first day of our brand new life. Welcome home.